Could a judge be about to release Prince Harry's private visa information? Did Prince Andrew lie in his infamous TV interview? And why does Catherine want to stop discussion of her outfits? You will not want to miss this week's show. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and on my panel this week is the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, Charlotte Griffiths, and the Daily Mail's diary editor, Richard Eden. Of course, welcome to you both. Now, a reminder to please do like and subscribe to the Daily Mail Royals channel for more great videos like this, and our Richard's very own series, Reading the Royals. And in fact, there is a whole new short series of that which started this week. And the first is all about how Prince Harry became Meghan Markle's spare. Well, if you missed that, you don't need to worry because it will play straight after this, so you don't need to go anywhere. Right, well, let's kick things off with a new portrait of Princess Catherine. Here it is. But it was a bit different. Richard, tell us why.
Well, it was different because it was taken by a very promising young lad, 6 years old, so I hear, which was Prince Louis. Which is very sweet.
Very sweet.
We're used to Catherine taking photographs. You know, we've got used to that very naturalistic style, the great way, obviously, she has with her children, and she manages to get, you know, beaming smiles, lovely reactions. But now the tables have turned slightly, and it's Louis who's taking her. So he's taking her at a distance, in the woods, and it was a shot that was released to mark World Cancer Day.
Oh, yes, indeed, which is obviously now, very unfortunately, a cause very close to Catherine's heart. But how did you rate the picture? Marks out of 10?
I thought it was very good, certainly showing great promise.
Better than Brooklyn Beckham.
Yeah, exactly. And he was Brooklyn Beckham and his pictures of elephants.
Shaded elephants.
So hard to photograph, but great to see.
Much older at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is with Catherine is we know she's talked about the importance of the natural world in terms of recovery and you know, making you feel better. So that really comes across in this picture.
Indeed. Now, Charlotte, we might think that Louis is inheriting his mother's photographic skills, but actually there's evidence that he might be taking after his father.
Yes, because after this photo came out, another one resurfaced, which was one that William took of Princess Diana. It must have been back in the 80s. And it's a really sweet picture because you can just see Diana's face looking down. And I think the perspective is really important in both these photos because you can tell from the photo that it's somebody very small taking the picture. And Diana's just looking down with total joy at this little boy. And when the photo resurfaced, I just imagined William at that age and just thought how sweet. And, you know, I think it'd be good for Louis to train up, actually, because we know that Catherine and William, both of them, don't really like press photographers getting too involved in the family. So if they can train him up from the age of 6, you know, he can take photos for the rest of their family life.
It's about time he started earning his keep, isn't it, really? 6 years old, it's getting on. The other thing about the Diana thing is like, well done if you could be a woman and look down into a camera and look good.
Yes, no double chin. There was no double chin. There was no. Then it was before the days of selfies where you looked up to look thinner.
Very jealous.
She still looked good.
Now, this wasn't the only nice moment with Catherine this week, was it? We also had this really sweet moment where she extended her walk specifically to be able to meet a little girl who called out her name, and you can watch that now.
Run away, say hello, princess.
Oh, well done. Thought you would.
Can I shake your hand? What's your name? Hello. Very nice to meet you. Is this your banana?
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
Sweet.
Does it?
No.
Oh no, it's not so sweet, hasn't it? But thank you for coming to say hello. I heard you saying hello from all the way back there, so I wanted to come and say hello to you. Very nice to meet you.
And you.
Thank you. You want to say hi? Very nice.
She's a princess.
I want to come and see your village and see what's going on here.
And then we saw her out in London accompanying a school class trip to the National Portrait Gallery. And Richard, there was, however, we alluded to it at the top of the show, there was some controversy over a piece in the Sunday Times. Do you want to explain that for us?
Yes, this was an article suggesting that Kensington Palace is going to stop giving out details of what Catherine is wearing on engagements. You know, traditionally, the press have been told what members of the royal family, particularly the women, are wearing because there's great interest in it. But the point of the article was that Catherine wants the media and people generally to focus on the purpose of each engagement rather than what she's wearing.
And I know you've spoken to palace sources about this. What did you learn?
Yeah, it's obviously a sensitive subject because no one wants to say anything on the record about it. But what the sources were stressing to me was that the situation hasn't changed. They say that when it comes to big events, trooping the colour and kind of big formal occasions often, they'll always say what Catherine's wearing. But when it comes to day-to-day engagements, that they don't at the moment release that information, and that's not going to change. But it's certainly got people talking, though.
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte, surely it's possible to talk about work and outfits? It doesn't have to be either or?
Well, yeah, Laura Craik wrote a really good piece about this for the Mail, which is she introduced a story about an event that Kate went to, and she said, she did one paragraph describing the event and then she said end of story. And of course it was a bit of a spoof, but the fact is that yes, we do want to write and read about the events that Catherine does, but then, you kind of need to lead into some more detail, and people are really interested in what she has to wear. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I noticed that she deliberately wore a very dark brown kind of office wear, not very interesting, dare I say. And it took internet sleuths seconds to find out exactly what she was wearing. So at least they're doing the hard work for us, or for the palace, in fact. But I think this is about Kate finding her voice. I think she has come back from cancer and she really wants the early foundation years projects that she works on to speak for itself. But I just don't see there's any reason why the two have to be mutually exclusive.
Jo, you wrote about this very subject this week, didn't you?
I did, for another newspaper, so I'm probably not allowed to say who. But no, the fashion industry in Britain is a multi-billion-pound industry. It's bigger than the coal industry, the steel industry. And Catherine is a big part of its exposure and championing particularly smaller British brands. I just think I think it's a shame that somebody with that power feels that fashion is something that's just not important in quotes, when I actually think it actually really is.
I mean, certainly on this programme, we've often discussed the thought that goes into outfits and the symbolism.
Like her pearls last week at the Holocaust event.
Exactly, yeah, I was thinking of that. But it's often the case. And, for example, when William and Catherine meet heads of state or people from other countries, or when they're on a foreign tour, they'll often wear something by a local designer or something that represents the colours from that country's flag.
Yeah.
A lot of thought goes into it. So to me, that's nothing to be ashamed of whatsoever.
Indeed, and I think, frankly, when you're a member of the royal family, it does matter what you're wearing. It does. Yeah. But what do you at home think? Should we discuss Catherine's fantastic outfits or not? Let us know, I'm sure you will, what you think in the comments below. Now, Richard, to a new scandal, I can scarcely believe it, involving Prince Andrew now, and the suggestions that he didn't tell the whole truth during his infamous Newsnight interview. What can you tell us? Yes,
unfortunately, it's new revelations about that old scandal, which is his terribly misjudged friendship with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, when he gave his now infamous interview to the BBC, to Emily Maitlis on Newsnight, his idea was to redeem his reputation and that sort of thing. And he was asked about those pictures taken back in December 2010 of him with Epstein in Central Park, New York. And he told Emily Maitlis that the only reason he'd met Epstein, because remember, this was a man who'd recently been released from prison, having served time for his sex offences, was so that Andrew could tell him that I'm not going to speak to you again.
Yes, because he was too honourable, so I had to go and see him in person.
Exactly. So that is literally what he said. But now what's been released are some emails, which frankly, very seedy, the tone is quite revolting, because there's an email from Andrew to Epstein which says, can't wait to see you again, looking forward to playing some more. But what's so significant is that this email was sent in February 2011, so it was 2 months after that date. So it completely undermines what he said. And, this is a serious matter, very serious indeed.
So, I mean, we should obviously say that Prince Andrew has denied any wrongdoing in regards to this, but has there been any statement from the palace about this?
Well, to be clear, Prince Andrew in the past has denied any wrongdoing in terms of, friendship with Epstein, but he hasn't said anything since these emails were published last weekend. Well, I've written a piece for Mail Plus today making the point that, that can't be allowed to stand. If you've got the brother of our king, the brother of our head of state, apparently lying on national TV, he has to address that. And, if this is genuine, then we've got a big problem.
Dear. Well, Richard, this leads me on to a question about your column for Mail Plus now. What have you said about this story in that?
Well, essentially, if Andrew's not going to comment, then action does need to be taken. And by that, I mean the formal roles that Andrew has. And, let's look at what they are. First of all, his place in 8th in the line of succession. He should be removed from that immediately. Then there's his role as a Councillor of State, which, like Prince Harry, he still has, where legally he can stand in for our monarch. And then also, I'm almost sort of embarrassed to say, Prince Andrew is a member of our highest order of chivalry, no less, with the Order of the Garter.
That's unfortunate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So, those things do have to be removed, I'm afraid.
Does this bring the whole Royal Lodge saga back into play?
Well, I think it's not a great look that you have the King's brother apparently lying to the nation, which is the accusation, but then living in a palace on very favourable terms. At Windsor, it's not great for the standing of the monarchy at all.
It's icky, isn't it?
He said on Newsnight, I cut off all contact. And then in an email, he says, stay in close contacts. These could not be more opposing sentences. And it's beyond icky. I think it's embarrassing for our whole nation.
Yeah, so I think Andrew needs to prove that that's wrong, that he didn't send the email or something like that.
That's not going to happen.
Action needs to be taken.
I'm sure we'll be covering more on this as it develops, but Richard's answer there leads me nicely to our comments, and in particular a question from CC Jones, who asks, question, can Prince Harry actually be removed from the line of succession? Isn't that his birthright since he is the son of the king? If he can be removed, what would that do to his children? Are they removed as well? Richard, what is the process?
Yeah, so to give you an example, it has happened several times before. The last time was Lord Nicholas Windsor, the son of the Duke of Kent. He was removed from the line of succession because he converted to Roman Catholicism.
Shocking.
I'm sorry, what a scandal.
Part of our constitution is you can't be a Catholic and be in the line of succession. So he was removed, and it just takes it would be a parliamentary act, just a note from the King to do it. He's already done it when he updated the members of the Councillors of State to include Edward and Anne. And it could be done very easily. And then in the question of his heirs, yes, that would mean that Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet would also be removed because they're only there as the children of Prince Harry. And
so then what happens to their titles in that event?
Yeah, that's a separate issue from the line of succession, but they would lose their places as well as their father.
Well, after the news that Princess Beatrice had welcomed another baby into the world, Rhianna Cohen asks, we don't see Beatrice and Eugenie's children's faces in photos, so why is that acceptable, but Harry and Meghan get criticised for doing the same? Just a question, no ill intention. Thank you for that. Charlotte, what do you make of that?
I have to say, I saw that sweet little picture of Athena, and I'm a sucker for a newborn. I've had 3 of them myself, and I was itching to see her face, and I did think, look, every mother has the right to be protective, but that newborn face will be unrecognisable in 2 or 3 weeks, let alone 6 weeks or 6 years. So I kind of wish she'd given us a glimpse of that little.
Well, you said similar
face.
Last week, didn't you, Richard?
Well, I think she's clearly making the point that I'm not going to release. They're not going to release images of their children. And I think they've done the same with her sister Sienna.
She's setting the tone for the future, isn't she? And fair enough.
Do you think it's a fair point that Harry and Meghan get sort of like pilloried for, Harry and Meghan get bashed for not showing their kids' faces?
Yeah, I don't think Harry and Meghan should be bashed for that, because we know how, Harry's upbringing affected him, being in the limelight, having to walk behind his mother's coffin. And there are many reasons to be annoyed with Harry, but I actually don't think that's one of them. So I don't think any of them should be bashed. But if you were going to show your child's face, it would be at that very early newborn stage.
Okay, well, PJ Reads was delighted by our naming Michael and Carol Middleton as our unsung royal heroes in last week's episode, writing, "What a lovely tribute to Carol and Michael. Unsung heroes indeed, never pushy, just rendering service to the whole country through their support of William, Catherine and their grandchildren. I hope I can be so helpful to my son and his family. They're an inspiration." Oh. Well, after a question from a viewer about Harry and Meghan's connection to Sussex, the place, V. King writes, "As a Sussex resident, born and bred, I really resent this couple using our county as their title. They did visit just once, didn't stay long and never returned. Get rid of them." Wow. Well, after our discussion of Harry's court case over his visa and reports of past drug use, Donna says this, "About the drugs in his book, my question is, how come no one has questioned all the laughing gas that he inhaled at the birthing hospital? I'm pretty sure this goes against all the rules. I just can't believe no one has ever mentioned it." Well, consider it mentioned, Donna. I mean, I would not be one to deny a nervous father a bit of a toke on the gas and air. You?
I actually think he's really exaggerated it. It's bad. There's no way that he'd be allowed to take, because he said he used it all up, and that actually wouldn't be allowed. If nothing else, Meghan would have decked him before letting him finish it all off. I mean, but my husband did have a little toke when I gave birth.
I think, it's only fair. It's only fair. But speaking of Richard and Harry and Meghan, here are a couple of comments from the new episode of Reading the Royals, which is about the Sussexes. Carmen Anjari writes, excellent summary of the description of the turn of events of the disaster, rise and fall of these two. While John and Marita Matthews, meanwhile, say, "That was a great piece, Richard. I learned even more about their crazy relationship. Doing fake royal tours must seem bizarre to Harry after doing the real deal." Now, a reminder that that show, Reading the Royals, will play straight after this one. And guess what? We're going to stick with Harry for a moment while we look at the latest in the legal challenge brought by the American Heritage Foundation think tank, which I'm sure you remember is trying to get a judge to release details on Prince Harry's application for a US visa, and specifically what he said about his past drug use. So what happened in court, Richard?
Yes, the hearing was last night, and the main development was the judge made clear he would be happy to release some details. He said that should be up to the Department for Homeland Security, and he kind of passed the buck slightly to them and said, it's kind of up to you what you release. I mean, his concern was that everyone has the right to privacy.
Right.
But other than that, he seemed quite open. So it's a question of watch this space again. Everyone
has the right to privacy, but he has written about it in his book, so is it private, right?
Well, I mean, I would have thought that should have some bearing.
Yeah.
If, he's written about his past drug use. That's the whole point that the Heritage Foundation is making.
Okay, well, we will keep an eye on that case and bring you more as we get it. Now, sticking with Harry and British comedian Jack Whitehall, who revealed that he was dropped by Prince Harry. Charlotte, you're among reporters who've written about this for years and, sort of like Harry sort of getting rid of or losing touch with friends, but this is from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, so Jack Whitehall said that he thinks he offended Harry by calling him ginger nuts at an awards ceremony, but also he kind of highlights the fact that actually it was when Meghan came on the scene that he suddenly disappeared and he didn't get invited to the wedding. And I think that's quite surprising because Harry invited two of his ex-girlfriends to the wedding. So why not invite his mate Jack Whitehall? And, Jack Whitehall's famous, and God knows there are a lot of celebrities they barely knew at that wedding. So it seems to me that it's directly correlated to Meghan coming on the scene, but I wonder if it's because Jack was friends with Harry in his wildest, most wild child days. And maybe when he met Meghan, he settled down and decided to cut off those people with whom he had maybe had one all-nighter too many. And he was trying to present himself as a sort of sensible, calm prince, which we all know he wasn't for years. And I think Jack was part of that circle, and so that circle is the one that got cut away.
Well, Richard, Meghan, meanwhile, has been at the centre of a mini controversy this week over a supposed good deed she did and her posting about it online. Can you explain the story?
Yeah, this is really interesting because what Meghan has now is her Instagram account. So she's obviously looking for material to put on it. And she posted a video basically to say thank you to the pop singer Billie Eilish, who had donated some merchandise from her tour. It was for a girl that Meghan had met when she was visiting the devastation of the wildfires in Los Angeles, and a family who'd lost their home. The mother had said to Meghan that their daughter's most prized possession at that time was the T-shirt she'd bought at a Billie Eilish concert.
Yeah.
And so on this video, Meghan explains that she thought she'd try and speak to a few people. She doesn't know Billie Eilish personally, but she knows people who know her. And then it was her showing off the fact that she'd managed to secure this merchandise.
Right.
But it really got people talking because has to be said, it was a really quite unusual video.
Well, it did get people talking, including one British writer, Charlotte, who called it nauseatingly contrived and fake. I mean, that's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, there's another piece in The Spectator that said she's too actressy, and it was similar vein. I think that Meghan's biggest problem is a lack of self-awareness, and it comes across, and she is an actress, I suppose I can hardly blame her, but she just comes across like she's acting. And in this video, it's supposed to be like TikTok style. I've just grabbed the camera and said a few words off the cuff. But you could tell that she was not wearing any makeup, possibly to create that kind of informal look, but that of course her hair had been done, and she was very careful not to show her house because we know she's very private about her house, so the angles were very carefully managed, and she very carefully called Harry my husband, which they always do in public. It drives me mad. They call each other my husband and my wife. If it was really off the cuff, informal, and she just found this load of Billie Eilish merch, it would have been less rehearsed. You could tell it had been rehearsed. I'd love to know how many times she practiced before she did it. And then one other thing that drove me mad about this thing was that she was kind of rude about the merch. She said, I don't even know what it is, but it looks great. And it's like, well, it's a lunchbox and some T-shirts, so we can all tell what it is. And it was almost kind of rude to talk down about these things, because what she's saying is that these things are more important to this girl than her own house, and will make her feel better about losing her entire house and probably her school as well. And in the next breath going, don't even know what this stuff is.
It's hard, isn't it? Sometimes I feel like, Meghan can't do anything, can't please anyone with what she does, but there's just something a bit, your house burned down, here's a T-shirt that I found a bit uncomfortable.
I know.
Do you know?
Well, I think the thing I found odd about it was that generally famous people, they don't really like to celebrate these type of things, in terms of, if they do charitable work, they try to keep that quiet.
I do have experience, and funnily enough, with Billie Eilish herself, when I worked for a cancer charity, she did a video for a little girl for us, when we were sort of expressly asked not to social that, because then they just get inundated.
Well, that's really interesting, because it's noticeable that Billie Eilish and the other musician, Adam Levine, who was involved, I don't think they've posted anything on social media. No. So I wonder if Billie Eilish is actually very happy that they're sort of Meghan boasting, all you need to do is pester me and then I can get this.
She's probably not very happy. But Jo, you're also right that, see, if Meghan were to watch Palace Confidential, and I'm sure she does, she'd be saying, it's so unfair, the media say I do everything wrong even when I'm trying to do a good deed. And so I'm loath to fall into that trap, but at the same time, she just keeps making these mistakes over and over again, and they just don't land right. And she's got to work on that.
But let's be clear, so this girl had lost her beloved T-shirt, right? Meghan could have just bought her one. I mean, they would be available.
She could have bought her a house.
She could have
invited her to stay.
She could have gone online and just bought her a shirt, sent it to her. Yeah. Thank you very much. She doesn't need to start boasting about her famous friends or this sort of thing. It comes across as very, what was that expression? Humble brag.
It was such a humble brag, wasn't it? The other thing that Meghan does, though, she does do these gestures, because we know that she organised an ice cream van at Kensington Palace, and when bullying allegations came out against her, she said, I can't be a bully. I got an ice cream van and gave free ice cream out to everyone. And I do feel like there are these gestures. There are other examples as well, but I think she does these things kind of not very often, and then talks about them a lot, and then thinks that's enough to make her a good, perfect person. But I think it has to be consistent, and actually real charity isn't something you show off about. I mean, maybe there are millions of examples of her doing charitable things that she hasn't told me about or told us about, but doesn't feel like it somehow, does it?
It just comes across as very fake, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Well,
really
that's not the first time that word's been used. Oh dear. But there is better news for Meghan and Harry. There's a piece by Grant Tucker in the Mail this week when we learned that despite some question marks over their future at Netflix, actually the company bosses have been quite positive about them.
Oh, well, come on. I mean, generally, companies...
Oh, don't be cynical. Come on. I thought we were going to have a positive moment.
You know, they want to promote their stars. They've signed them for some vast amount of money. The last thing they're going to be doing is openly saying, oh, yeah, Harry and Meghan, they're a load of rubbish. I mean, they'll wait till after the deal finishes before that happens.
That's
remember what happened with Bill Simmons and Spotify? You know, so the fact that Netflix, which is about to release a new series, says we think Meghan's great, I'd be absolutely amazed if they didn't.
Oh, I mean, gosh, you're so cynical. Isn't that incredible?
Let's just remember the show hasn't come out yet.
I can't wait. Well, to another very popular Mail Online piece now on fashion mishaps suffered by the royals. First up is Diana's famous wedding dress, which might have seemed perfect to millions around the world, but designer Elizabeth Emanuel says that the dress, which was ivory silk and taffeta, became so creased in the carriage that she was left horrified and feeling faint. I remember a lot of talk about that dress being creased, don't you?
It was
I was so young, to me it just looked like a fairy tale. I loved it. And then there was Meghan leaving the tag on this scarlet self-portrait dress during a trip to Tonga in 2018. And what made it worse was the photographers could read that on the tag it said, returns will only be accepted if this tag remains attached. We've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah.
And the following year, Catherine caused a fashion stir by wearing this purple silk crepe Gucci blouse backwards. Now, the article says it's not clear if that was deliberate or not, though I suspect some viewers might think she wore it better that way. While there we have the late Queen now, who suffered not one, but two wardrobe malfunctions in 2010 at the party for King Constantine of Greece's 70th birthday. First, the strap over her handbag broke, and then someone spilled what's said to be coffee on her gown. I mean, Charlotte, if I'd spilled coffee on the Queen, I'm sorry, I would tell everybody. That's a story.
Mortified, yes. Can you imagine the glaring look she must have given that person? But I think two fashion faux pas in a long career of being the Queen isn't too bad. There was one more, though. I wrote about it 2 years ago. She went out and didn't realise till she got out of the car, but there was a hole in her glove and her finger was slightly sticking out of the hole.
It's absolutely outrageous.
And actually, she did apparently get really, really cross about it, and somebody got in a lot of trouble back at Buckingham
Well, to be honest, I mean, you know, it's probably somebody's job to make sure that everything's fine.
Several people's job, that's the thing. She must think, why am I paying these people?
I mean, it does, you know, we can laugh about it now, but it does make them relatable, doesn't it? To see those tiny little slips now and again.
Yeah, they're only tiny. It's not like the Janet Jackson moment. But I'd like to see a really bad one, like a hair extension falling out or a hat blowing off. But I quite like the ones where they get their dress stuck in the door, like Zara Tindall did. They're always quite funny, because God knows I've done that about 100 times.
You're just pure evil, Charlotte Griffiths. Pure evil. Well, we'll put a link to that below and you'll be able to see that for yourself. But for now, can you hear that? That is right. It's time to honour an unsung royal hero of the week. Now, Richard, there are some royals travelling abroad this week who you would like to nominate as unsung heroes.
Yes, this is the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, Prince Edward and Sophie, who have travelled to India and Nepal together. We've often spoken on this programme about how they carry out foreign engagements separately. You know, we've seen that on quite a few occasions, but this is their first joint visit to Nepal. And it's very interesting. It's all their different interests. In the case of Prince Edward, you've got the Duke of Edinburgh's award and these type of schemes. And then with Sophie, it's those sort of gritty causes that we've discussed before, environmental, women who've been victims of violence and this type of thing. But it's seems to have been going down very well in Nepal, and really interesting trip. Brilliant.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we did have a viewer question why you don't see Edward and Sophie together. Maybe they watch the show. And so let's trot off to India together.
We're so influential.
Earlier in the show, Charlotte, we were talking about how Catherine doesn't want to talk about her outfits when she's on these tours, but the fact that this trip isn't being talked about as much as other ones that, you know, done by Catherine and William, it just shows that they just don't get the same attention, do they?
I know, it's quite a juxtaposition, because Nepal is a really big, major trip in India. It must cost a fortune, and really you have to ask, what's the point on going on these big royal tours if nobody knows you're doing it, you know? So I have to say the juxtaposition is a little bit depressing, because I think what Sophie does is great, and her clothes are fine, you know, they're quite interesting, but Kate has that star power, and it's just a shame to see her sort of almost rejecting that star power. And I bet Sophie wishes she had a little bit of a sprinkling of that stardust.
Well, we always bang the drum for Super Sophie here. So, you know, if you watch Palace, then you know exactly what she's up to. But quick word on Princess Anne, Richard. Now, last week we were talking about that potentially fatal accident she had last week. And then this week she's carrying out an engagement connected with that.
Yes, in the sense she's gone back to hospital. She's gone back to visit Southmead Hospital in Bristol, which is where she was treated last summer after that mysterious incident, we have to say, where she sustained injuries consistent with being kicked in the head by a horse.
Yes, but we don't really know.
But we don't know, and
Yeah.
she just couldn't understand it because there were no horses near where she was found. But anyway, I'm sure she'll be thanking staff at the hospital when she goes back today.
That's really lovely. Well, despite her gung-ho attitude, I'm sure it will be a moving occasion. Now, in honour of Edward's trip to Nepal and India, we've picked out some brilliant pictures of the royal family in the subcontinent over the years. Hope you enjoy these. Some great ones there. A reminder, you can slow the speed down if you want to watch that again. That's what some of our commenters say that they do, and they love it. They're loving it. Now, a reminder that the new Reading the Royals on how Prince Harry became Meghan Markle's spare is up next. Click here for that. Time just now to say thank you for Richard, Charlotte, and to you for watching. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.